Hello, this is William Michael, and I'd like to thank you for taking time to listen to my walk talks. I hope you're finding them helpful. I want to take a minute and tell you about the platform that I'm using to make and publish these podcasts and to recommend it to you. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. It was recommended to me, and I found it to be very easy to use. First of all, it's free. Many other podcast services require a monthly fee in order to upload and store podcast episodes, but Anchor requires no payments at all. Second, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your computer or even from your phone. Third, Anchor distributes your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So when folks listen to your podcast, if they enjoy it and want to support your work, they can make contributions right through Anchor. It's really everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And I strongly recommend it for anyone who's interested in producing a podcast. You can download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. God bless. This is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and today is Tuesday, October 26th. I've been surprised over the past few months by how many contacts I've received from men in different places around the country who are beginning to do the work of restoring a true classical liberal arts curriculum in private schools, different places, some associated with bishops, some working independently, but it seems like the tide is finally changing, and there are more and more men reading the Academy website, listening to these talks, watching videos, studying online courses with us, who are starting to realize that not only is this the true classical Catholic curriculum, but that it's perfectly feasible to install this curriculum in modern educational contexts. And when we talk on the phone and discuss the practical issues, I think men are often surprised at how practical this actually is. In fact, I often argue with men I speak with that the modern alternative is actually the model that's not practical, as history is proving. In time, I believe that there's simply going to be no other option. The modern option is going to simply run out of gas and fade away. And this is especially true, not necessarily true of the public schools, because they'll always be able to draw on public resources. But this is especially true of the private schools that have taken advantage of a number of good providences over the past 150 years, whether it's boatloads of immigrant nuns pouring into the country in the 1900s to staff the Catholic parochial schools, whether it's the abundant wealth of the American economy through the 1900s, or at least through the first 2/3 of the 1900s, Christians have enjoyed a number of fortunate conditions which have made a modern Christian school culture possible that has never existed before in history, and I believe is not going to exist for much longer. And what we're going to find when reality sets in, because American life for the past 200 years has not been reality, historically speaking. America has been blessed with an advantage historically of an entire continent of untapped natural resources that was able to make one nation extraordinarily wealthy. But that wealth has been used prodigally and wastefully because it's just seemed like it was so abundant that it would last forever and we can afford to squander it. But now we're coming under more and more pressure to rein things in, and we're going to find that many American institutions cannot exist if we have to be careful and prudent about our practical works. Many of the American institutions and customs take for granted a superabundance of wealth and leisure that can simply be wasted at will and easily regained. I believe we're beginning to see those days come to an end. And it's not that we're entering into some kind of terrible condition. I think we're simply entering into a realistic, more globally normal set of circumstances that's going to force us to seek to learn how to do things sustainably. When we look through history, we see nothing like the modern school system, and that should always make us pause, because the society that was capable of producing so many saints didn't produce this educational system, didn't produce this model of education. The culture that spent so much of its time and talent in the work of education never suggested the methods or models of education that have been practiced in non-Catholic or even anti-Catholic America. It's said that there are many ways to skin a cat. We like to acknowledge that everyone is free to do things in his or her own way, and that there are many different ways to do things. But again, I think this is owed to the superabundance that America has enjoyed. The truth is, when time and resources are limited, there may be only one way to skin the cat, as it were. Sustainability becomes a real test of what's true and what's false. Think back to the book of Acts. The Jewish leaders were upset by the trouble that was being caused by the apostles. The apostles went around not merely teaching some different doctrine, But they went about working miracles. They were healing people. They were raising the dead. They were being delivered from prisons miraculously. News of the Christian church and the Christian message was spreading, at least from the Jewish perspective, like a disease through the country, and they wanted to cut off its head by seizing, imprisoning, and even killing the apostles. And they held a conference, and at the conference they were debating what they should do with the apostles. And one of them, named Gamaliel, stood up and warned the other Jewish leaders. And what he said is, leave them alone. Just leave them alone. And Gamaliel knew that there was another principle, the ultimate principle, which they were not considering as an option as they sought to figure out what to do. The Jewish people had been identified as God's people for up to as many as 1,800 years. And there was this new religious movement, definitely remarkable, but new. And Gamaliel warned the Jewish leaders and said, leave them alone. And he said, if this is just some man-made disturbance, it'll bubble for a little while and then it will fizz out. And we won't actually need to do anything. It'll simply run out of gas and die by itself. Sorry if I mixed about 25 different images there, but you understand what I'm saying. Gamaliel warned or advised the other Jewish leaders to just leave the Christians alone, because if they actually believed that this wasn't from God, then there's no way that it could possibly endure. And it will just die of itself. But he warned them that if this is, in fact, the work of God, the will of God, then you may find yourselves fighting against God. And if that happens to be the case, then nothing that you do will stop them. And the ultimate test in Gamaliel's mind, and I believe he's presented to us as a wise elder in Israel, the ultimate test in Gamaliel's mind was the test of sustainability. If this is from God, if this is divinely energized, then it will overcome every obstacle, every difficulty, every setback, and will just continue to grow and grow. And there will be nothing you can do about it. And if you try to resist it, you'll find yourself fighting against the power of God itself. And if this is just a human work, consider what an undertaking it is for mere mortal men. there's no way such a work will be able to endure, and it will simply fade away. The test in Gamaliel's mind is sustainability. And I believe we're entering into a period in our society where many things that we have grown up with and have assumed to be necessary and natural and normal are going to fade away. They're going to prove to be unsustainable. And we're already experiencing this in many different areas of our lives. Things that we take for granted are not sustainable. The superabundance that we've enjoyed is not going to continue much longer. The bubble of American abundance is showing signs that it's going to pop. And the normal experience, the normal way of life, known to the entire world, is going to settle in to American culture. And we see this in many places of our lives, but one place I think we've seen it very clearly is in Catholic education, where it's becoming clearer and clearer that private schools built on the public school model are not sustainable. It was possible for a time, thanks to some good fortune, as I said, the abundance of free teachers that arrived in the form of immigrant nuns from Europe in the 1900s. Those nuns powered the growth of the parochial school system and even made it able to exist. But the American schools were not capable of reproducing all of the nuns that were imported from Europe. And when that generation of nuns died off, that workforce that was taken for granted by those developing the parochial schools suddenly ran out, and now we see what Catholic schools are doing, trying to find a replacement workforce that has none of the virtues of those old European Catholic nuns. I share these statistics quite often in the 1960s. Twice as many American children were in Catholic schools as are today. Twice as many children were in Catholic schools as are today. The number of children in Catholic schools today is half, probably less than half now, of what it was in the 1960s. When we consider how the population has grown, we find that the situation is far worse than those numbers even appear. A much, much smaller percentage of the American population is receiving a Catholic education in 2021 than did in 1960. Our nation is not becoming more Catholic. It's becoming much less Catholic. The parochial school system that was developed in the 1900s is fading away. The dream that Catholics were able to live in for a century, even more than a century, is coming to an end. And the question is whether Catholics will be able to produce solutions to modern needs and problems that are actually sustainable. Now, I think of these things very differently, and I know that people don't like me for thinking as I do. They think I'm sort of a gadfly, and to be frank, they treat me and speak to me as the Athenians spoke to Socrates, and I think there's a reason for that. I think in many ways, the way that I think does parallel the way that Socrates thought in his generation, and the reaction of the people to him is very much like the reaction of people to me. But I grew up a non-Catholic in a working class family that had very little money. And I had to I had to pay for myself to go to school. I was the first person to go to college. I had to figure out how to go to college. I had to figure out how to survive. I had to learn to work around the clock, to overcome disadvantages, to work with inferior resources to those working around me. I had to learn to be resourceful. And everything that I did had to be sustainable, had to be self-sustaining, because I had no connections and no resources. And so when I evaluated my options, I had to consider sustainability. That affected the way I studied. That affected the way I ran my household. That affected the way I taught, and so on. And when I started the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, it was started in a spirit of poverty. I undertook the work of starting the academy, and I didn't have a single dollar. And I simply had to begin working through tutoring to make every dollar, first to provide for my family, and second, to provide for the development of the academy. Everything had to be sustainable. I had no option to lose any money. If something wasn't profitable or sustainable, I shouldn't say profitable, sustainable. If something wasn't able to sustain itself, I had to immediately stop it because there was no money. I couldn't let it run at a loss like Jeff Bezos did Amazon. Everything that I did had to work and had to pay its own way. And that forced me to seek counsel from people whom I knew lived under the same pressing circumstances. And Those people were not people around me. Those people were saints from church history who I knew faced similar obstacles and had to find ways to do things that were self-sustaining. And the most significant of these discoveries was the work of the early Jesuits. They were a missionary society. They had very little in terms of resources, and they had to figure out how to do things in a way that was not only spiritually sound, but effective and self-sustaining. It took great practical wisdom to figure out the methods and systems that they figured out. And thanks be to God, they preserved the record of that system in the Ratio Studiorum, which we have today, which was published in 1599. And I remember finding that and reading through it and seeing the system and understanding the wisdom and necessity of it, because it was faithful, it was effective, and it was sustainable. And perhaps those three qualities need to be kept in focus. Is it faithful? Is it effective? And is it sustainable? Another quality that I hear a lot in modern business discussions would be, is it scalable? That is, can it grow? Can this model grow? So maybe we should have 4 qualities. Is it faithful? Is it effective? Is it sustainable? And is it scalable? If it is successful, can it grow and continue to be successful? Or does its success depend on its limited size or locality, or on a few gifted workers? Or is it something that's transferable and can grow and be installed elsewhere, like a franchise in business? And when I looked at the Ratio Studiorum and learned more and more about the Jesuits and the work that they did in education, I realized that I had found a pot of gold in the Ratio Studiorum. And I started studying it and thinking about how it could be put into practice today. What I'd like to propose today, and I'm not going to get into it in too much detail because I'm actually out for a walk and it's getting dark right now, so my time is limited. But many of the principles of the Ratio I've used to develop the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. And yet I've done so while considering the benefits that modern educational and communication technology has made available to me, benefits that they did not possess. And some may argue and say, well, how do you know these benefits are, in fact, sustainable? And that's a good question. I'm not going to argue that our wireless society is necessarily sustainable, but I do believe it's important, temporarily at least, and hopefully for a long time, because it allows us to do work that otherwise I don't think can be done. And it allows us to do it affordably effectively, faithfully, sustainably, and scalably. And what I've done is focused over the past 20 years all of my attention on building or on restoring the classical Catholic curriculum. Because that's the foundation on which this house of Catholic education needs to be built. We cannot run schools like modern schools where teachers just teach their own thoughts and we just hope to hire good teachers. That's the most foolish thing about modern education, is that the schools are dependent on the employees. The same mistake the Catholic schools made, the public schools are designed the same way, and they're going to run into the same problem more and more over time. The workforce they take for granted is not reproducing. But the curriculum is the foundation of the school, just like the Catholic faith is the foundation of the Catholic Church. The curriculum is the school, and everyone involved is simply responsible to help communicate that curriculum to the students. And so I focused all of my time, all of my energy, all of my resources on the work of researching and restoring the curriculum that's needed for the restoration of Catholic education. And now, I think I'm beginning to understand how this can begin to work itself out as an active system of education in a sustainable and scalable way, thanks to the example of the Jesuits explained in the Ratio. Now, the Jesuits, what they did was they built a hierarchical system in their schools. The schools really were apprenticeships. The school was run like an apprenticeship, really also I could say like an army. The principle in the school was that no one should do a job that someone less experienced and less skilled than them can do. And so the schoolmaster would do the work that only the schoolmaster can do. And he would delegate other tasks to students and set students who were more experienced over less experienced students. And they created a hierarchy and delegated the tasks throughout the school community. So there might be only one trained schoolmaster overseeing the education of several hundred boys because of the collaboration of all of the boys within that school community. They referred to these arrangements as decurions, where a student would be set over a number of younger or less experienced students, and each level of hierarchy would answer to the next higher up. But it was a hierarchy that consisted of students working to assist the schoolmaster. And that was great for a local school. But if we move to a virtual school, I believe it can be even more effective. Today, I was chatting with a young man who was studying in the academy and who was interested in helping. And as we were chatting, he was asking how he could help, and I said, well, one way you could help is with grading. If you complete an assignment and I review your assignment and give you feedback and you understand everything that's required by that assignment, there's no reason that you can't then turn around and grade other students' work. If there's an assignment that you don't feel comfortable grading, you can pass that on to me. But for most of the assignments, after you've had yours graded and we've worked through the details of what's expected, you should be able to turn around and use your own assignment as the grading rubric to review other students' work. And that idea pleased him. And I said to him, I think you've just helped me to figure something out. And I can see very clearly now how online students can all be turned into teachers' assistants, and the entire school program can be operated like an apprenticeship, where novices come in and they learn the ropes, and as soon as they begin to gain some success, they're challenged to turn around and help someone else. As they continue to study on their own, they assist those beneath them. And the higher they advance through their own study and work, the more helpful they become. They become helpers of the helpers, and the hierarchy develops. And in exchange for this work, they receive free tuition. And the school becomes sustainable financially, not by begging people to donate money, which is unsustainable and often detrimental to the mission of the school, but it also promotes the fellowship within the school, a sense of community and responsibility, and is a sustainable kind of sustainability. And so what I'm going to be focusing on over time is being more generous with written assessments. I've been limited in my ability to give written assignments to students because I simply haven't had the time to provide them with sufficient review and feedback. But I would like to use written assignments more and more. But I'm going to recruit the help of students who are submitting good work and ask them to assist, as the old decurions did in the Jesuit schools. And the higher they rise in their studies, the more courses they should be able to help with. And they'll simultaneously be studying and growing on their own, while also serving their fellow Christians. And there's another important aspect to this. Aristotle explained that the only way that we can know whether a man actually knows a subject is that he can effectively teach it. We can tell whether a man knows a subject when he attempts to teach it to others. And such a system would give boys an opportunity to challenge themselves to teach. what they've learned or what they have claimed to have learned. And I think this is another key in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy moving forward as both a sustainable educational model for the 21st century, but also a scalable model for the 21st century. And so you're going to notice, if you're enrolled in academy courses, you're going to notice from this point on more emphasis on written assignments, which, as I said, are better means of assessment than some of the quizzes that we've used in the past. And I'm going to be recruiting students to assist with the review of other students' work in exchange for more affordable tuition. The program is free to study to begin with, but grading is a service that's reserved for those who have paid enrollment, because the time is simply, there's no way to give it to everybody. And so those who have paid to obtain graded assessment will be able to earn scholarship, as it were, in exchange for their assistance in the work of reviewing and helping their fellow students. As I said earlier, the challenge of sustainability is one of the things that allows me to keep working and not engage much with modern fads and things like that. There are many people, many organizations, many programs operating today that are not going to exist in 20 years. They don't need to be competed with today because they're like dead men walking. It's just easy to see the programs are not adapting, they're not upgrading, they're not investing where they should be investing. And as things continue to change, the circumstances that those institutions and programs just take for granted every day as they go on with their everyday business, just like they did in 1990, are going to one day find the rug pulled out from under their feet. And it's going to be impossible for them at that moment to come up with a solution, because the solution has already been in development elsewhere for 20 plus years. And there's simply no way to quickly produce that alternative. And as the academy continues to develop, excuse me, as the curriculum fills out, as our system becomes more and more efficient, the future, I believe, of Catholic education is going to be obviously classical, individual, and virtual. I'm not opposed to local brick and mortar schools, but as I've explained many times, the purpose of schools is not to act like sources of information, as schools were in past generations. But schools in the future are primarily responsible to serve as cultural centers. And the schools of the future will have to learn what that means and how to operate as such, because if they try to compete with virtual sources for intellectual achievement they're not going to be able to compete. Schools need to learn to develop to serve students in the 21st century and not merely try to copy and paste something that was done in the past. Even as I consider the Ratio Studiorum, I can see in it many things that are accidental, non-essential to their academic work and success, many things that are simply obsolete today, many obstacles they had to deal with that don't exist today. And we have more opportunity than they did. And yet, some of their practices and methods are timeless and apply to all situations. And those I'm working to take and imitate, while also seeking alternatives to those timed solutions that they practice which are no longer applicable. But the Decurion system that the Jesuits established and ran in their schools, I believe, can be established virtually and become even more effective, even more influential. And so we're going to move increasingly to written assessments and try and delegate the work of reviewing student work and helping to assess student work to other students who develop in something that resembles an apprenticeship of Catholic classical education. I'd love to know your thoughts. What I'd love to know from those of you who listen is I'd like to know what you see on the ground where you are. I have access to the philosophy. I have access to the history. I don't need any input in those areas. But what's interesting to me would be to know what's going on where you live, in your diocese, in your area. What are the schools doing? What's going on in the parishes? The things that I'm discussing, do you see what I'm talking about to be true in your area? Do you see examples that contradict what I'm suggesting? I'd love to know from you what's going on where you are, and whether you see these trends, whether you think I'm right about my judgment of where things are headed, or whether you think that there are examples that may suggest something else. I'd love to hear information from your specific place and circumstances. If you'd like to talk about these things, you can contact me on the forums in the Academy at any time, or just by email. You can write to mail@classicalliberalarts.com. If you're working to organize a school and are listening to these talks for ideas or inspiration in that work, I'd like you to get in touch. I'd like to talk about these things not just in the universal terms that I use in these talks, but more particularly within your unique circumstances. I think those local discussions are really important, and I'd like to hear more from men on the ground engaged in these works, because I'd like to talk not only about the big picture issues, but I'd like to also discuss what's going on in practical issues on the ground, locally, in different places. So please, get in touch, tell me your story, what's going on, and let's see what we can do to collaborate and work together to help promote Catholic education in the next generation. God bless.